They say the deepest betrayal doesn't come from an enemy but from someone you love. And that's exactly how it all began for me. My name is Susan. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived my whole life in a small house on the outskirts of Nashville. My husband, God rest his soul, was a mechanic. A simple, honest man with grease-stained hands and a clean heart. When he passed, I was left with his pension, and with it, the responsibility to carry on. I had to learn how to live with the silence and the absence. But I never let go of my faith. I still believed the love of family was enough to keep me standing. That's what I held on to. On Sundays, I tidied the house like I was expecting important guests, even though I knew it would only be Eric, my only son. He was always around. Paid the bills, brought groceries, asked if I was taking my meds. I'd say yes, but sometimes I'd just smile so he wouldn't worry. He used to say, "Don't worry about a thing, Mom, I'll take care of it." And I let him. After all, I was the one who raised him on my own with courage and faith. I traded sleep for his fevers, toys for milk, dreams for survival. A mother does that without hesitation. I just never imagined that one day my trust would turn into a bargaining chip. Some days I'd look out at the backyard and remember little Eric playing with toy cars between the trees. That's where he used to tell me he'd take care of me when he grew up. Those words echoed in my mind. And I believed them, not because I was naive, but because I had hope. When you're a mother, your heart gets shaped by unspoken promises. And his eyes, even as a grown man, still held a trace of that little boy. When he told me the finances were fine, I never questioned it. What mother doubts her own child without reason? Life was already too hard to add suspicion to the mix. Still, I started feeling a strange emptiness, a hole in the soul, you know? Like something was out of place. The house was clean, the coffee fresh, the radio playing gospel songs. But something didn't sit right. It felt like God was trying to show me something, but I couldn't figure out what. In those moments, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, look up at the sky and say, "Talk to me, Lord." And he did. Not with words, but with feelings. With little warnings. That's when I started paying closer attention. My son kept saying the pension money wasn't stretching because of inflation, gas prices, the government, everything. And I believed him. But one day, when I tried to pay the gardener, I realized the money didn't go as far as it used to. The envelope felt lighter. I asked Eric, and he kissed my forehead and said, "Don't worry, Mom, everything's fine." And the problem was, I didn't worry. It was easier to believe everything was okay than to face the cliff I didn't want to see. The pain of doubt is worse than the pain of truth, until one tiny detail changed everything. A late electric bill, a strange letter in the mail, the grocery clerk asking if everything was all right because my checks had started bouncing. That's when the little voice in the back of my mind wouldn't shut up. Small inconsistencies kept adding up like a leaky faucet. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, my mother's heart already knew. It was time to face something no prayer could prevent the raw truth. The following week, I went to the store by myself. It was supposed to be a simple trip for bread, milk, and blood pressure meds. But that day my card was declined. The cashier tried 3 times, then looked at me gently and said, "Mrs. Parker, it looks like your card has been blocked." I stood there for 2 seconds that felt like hours. The floor spun beneath me. I felt like a lost child at a bus station. The cashier added kindly, "It was used recently at an electronics store, you know. I didn't know." And those words hit me like a stone to the chest. I left the store empty-handed and full of questions. My steps were steady on the outside, but inside I was shaking. I took a deep breath, looked up at the cloudy sky, and asked God to show me what was behind this mess. An old friend used to say, "When you don't understand, trust. When you do understand, kneel." I was still in the first stage, but something inside me was already screaming. I walked into my house looking at every corner with fresh eyes. Had I been blind this whole time? Or had I just tried too hard to protect the one hurting me most? I didn't want to confront Eric without proof, so I called Marley, my neighbor. She was one of those people who loved digging around on the internet and always said your phone is the new prayer journal. We used to laugh about that. That afternoon I asked her to help me check my account online. We sat on the couch, my hands trembling, her glasses on her nose. When the screen loaded, it looked like a soap opera script, fancy stores, plane tickets, gambling websites, all in my name. All on my card. Marlene's eyes went wide. I couldn't even cry. It felt like I swallowed a cactus. I just sat there staring at the numbers. Not because of the money itself, but because of what it meant. Betrayal has a smell, a sound, a color. And right there in those statements, it looked like desperation. My heart was pounding in my throat. My breath got shallow. My son had done that. The same boy who used to cling to me during storms. Who once said, "Mom, I'll never leave you." Right there in front of me was the proof that sometimes even faith bleeds. But even in pain, I didn't scream. I got up, thanked Marlene, and went to make dinner. Yes, dinner. It's strange how your body goes on autopilot when your soul breaks. I chopped onions, washed rice, lit the stove. Not for the food, but for my dignity. Cooking reminded me of who I was. As the rice boiled and filled the kitchen with its scent, I kept asking myself, how did we end up here? Maybe it was time to stop pretending everything was fine. But even then, I didn't want to lose my son. I wanted justice, yes, but more than that, I wanted redemption. And with all that chaos inside me, I waited for him to come home that night. When he walked in, he had his usual smile and said, "Mom, I brought ice cream." The sound of the door closing felt like thunder. He came over, hugged me, and asked if I was okay. I turned around, looked him in the eye, and asked, "Son, what is a mother's trust worth to you?" His smile disappeared. His joy faded like paint in the rain. With a steady voice and a trembling heart, I handed him the bank statement. It was time to look in the mirror and see the reflection of a mistake staring back. He froze, staring at the paper, like the words were burning through it. Sweat on his temples. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a choked-up "Mom." I didn't say anything else. I turned around and started putting away the dishes. Every spoon in the rack screamed louder than any argument, and inside I was shaking. The silence of truth is deafening. He sat on the couch, shoulders slumped. After a few seconds, he whispered, "I was just borrowing it. I swear I was going to pay it all back." It felt like a stranger trying to copy my son's voice. Eric wasn't a stranger. He was my boy. And even then, hurt as I was, I still saw pieces of him in that pale face. He kept going, "Mom, I just wanted to help you. You did everything by yourself." I thought I could ease the load, but that kind of relief came at too high a price. I took a deep breath, walked over slowly, and said, "You didn't just take my money, Eric. You took my peace." Then I went to my room. Behind that door, the weight of the world landed on my back. I didn't cry out loud. I just laid down, turned to the wall, and let the tears fall all the way to my soul. I remember grabbing the Bible on my nightstand, the same one my husband used. Its edges were worn, but it still held promises. I opened to Psalm 37 without thinking, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will do the rest." In that moment, I didn't want revenge. I wanted a miracle. Sleep came slowly, heavy, like years of tiredness finally found a crack to seep through. I fell asleep thinking of little Eric and woke up seeing the adult version. And even broken, even betrayed, my heart still wanted to believe there was something good on the way. Something past the pain. The next morning brought a timid sun through the curtain. I got up, made the bed, ran my hand through my hair, and looked in the mirror. My reflection showed dark circles, but also a strength I hadn't seen in a while. It was like God was whispering, "You're still a mother, and you're still my daughter." Instead of calling the police, I knelt right there on the bedroom floor. "Lord, I don't know what to do with this, but you do. If my son is lost, then use this pain to bring him back." Some people think praying means closing your eyes and waiting for magic. But sometimes it's about having the courage to keep your eyes open through the storm. And that's what I did. I spent the day in silence, but not the kind that runs away, the kind that believes. I cleaned the house, did laundry, swept the porch. With each task I kept repeating in my mind, "Use this pain. Lord, turn this hole into a bridge." Eric left early and didn't come back for dinner. I didn't call. I didn't cry. I just put his plate in the fridge like always, because despite everything I still hoped he'd come home. And in that waiting I found a new kind of strength. One that doesn't shout but endures. That doesn't need applause, just purpose. I started spending more time with the neighbors, joined church meetings, crocheted in the late afternoons. Every stitch was a prayer. Every thread a little hope. The pain still lived in me, but so did the dignity. And while I walked through that minefield of emotions, something started to change, not in Eric just yet, but in me. And maybe that was the first step toward the miracle I didn't even know was coming. The weeks passed slowly, like walking barefoot on stones. I kept my routine: morning tea, gospel radio, quick trips to the pharmacy. But one day, something broke the pattern. I got a call from a community center across town. The woman on the line spoke gently. "Mrs. Parker, your son Eric is here. He signed up for one of our programs. He's helping out with financial recovery." My hand was sweating so much the phone almost slipped. I didn't say a word. I just listened. She continued, "He asked us to let you know he's trying to do things differently now." After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen staring at the floor like it might have the answers. Was it real? Was it regret? Or just another performance? I picked up the Bible again but didn't open it. I just held it tight like it was my shield. I remembered the prayer I had said days earlier. "Lord, if my son is lost, use this pain." Had God started answering? Or was this just another test to see if my faith could take one more blow? I paced the living room, unsure whether to smile or cry. I did neither. I just breathed and moved through the day. 2 days later, he showed up. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, there he was. Same body, but a different look. His eyes were sunken red, but humble. He seemed smaller than I remembered. He didn't walk in with the old confidence. He stepped in carefully with trembling hands. I made space. We sat down. And then he began, "Mom, I lost control. I just wanted to impress you, to show I could live well. But I got in too deep." It was the first time in a long while that he spoke without defending himself. No excuses, just remorse. As he talked, I saw two faces in him. The boy who once said he'd be my hero, and the man who had been overtaken by pride. But I listened, patiently. I didn't interrupt. Only when he finished did I say pride makes us steal what God never meant to take. But repentance returns what money can't buy. He lowered his head. A simple gesture, but heavy with meaning. In that moment, I knew there was something real happening. A beginning, a restart maybe. Not the end of the problem, but the start of the answer. Eric went on to say he had joined a support group for people in debt. That's where he realized how deep he was. He said he didn't know how to ask for forgiveness without sounding like he wanted something. But I felt something strong, Mom, something that pushed me toward change. I had to do better. I listened but didn't offer easy answers. You don't plant a harvest and reap it the same day. Real forgiveness needs roots. But inside me, faith started to stir again. Like a seed that insists on growing, even buried in darkness. I got up from the chair, walked over to him, and put my hand on his shoulder. Son, God even used your shame to teach you honesty. I forgive you. But I want that forgiveness to change you, not comfort you. He nodded, eyes filled with tears. He didn't say another word. And in that moment, he didn't need to. The silence wasn't the silence of lies anymore. It was the silence of healing. And neither of us knew yet that more lessons were coming, the kind only true faith can carry. It wasn't easy to look at him without remembering everything. But my heart knew how to separate the mistake from the person. In the days that followed, he came to visit more often. Sometimes just to bring fresh bread, other times to sit on the couch and tell me about the workshops at the community center. I listened but let him set the pace of the conversations. One day he told me about a man who almost lost his retirement to a scam. Made me think of you, Mom, he said, eyes glassy. That sentence hit me hard. It meant the reality was starting to sink in. I noticed he began avoiding his phone. He said he canceled the cards, blocked the betting apps, and sold a fancy watch to start paying off his debts. I saw honesty in every step he took. But what moved me most was that he wasn't looking for approval. He just showed up. He hugged me, helped in the kitchen, watered the plants. And in those small actions, I saw the depth of his repentance. When a child comes back, it's not with promises, it's with actions. And over time, those actions started to heal a part of me I didn't even know was still bleeding. One day he offered to speak at church about personal finance. He talked about the danger of greed, the trap of debt, and how pride can blind even the best intentions. The pastor, emotional, said not every miracle is a healing of the body. Sometimes it's a healing of character. And those words echoed in my mind for days. That night in prayer I gave thanks, but I also asked, Lord, don't let him fall back. Hold his hand like you held mine when everything fell apart. It was a simple prayer but full of hope. I won't lie, the past still hurts sometimes. Seeing Eric's name on the statements, remembering the declined card, the panic in the store. Those memories came and went like light rain that soaks you quietly. But with each of his new gestures, another drop of healing washed over me. That's how faith works, it cleanses the soul slowly. And the courage to forgive begins where pride ends. I had already chosen to forgive. Now I needed to learn how to trust again. And that process, though slow, was already in motion. One afternoon, he showed up holding the hand of an elderly woman. This is Mrs. Irene. They're trying to sell her a fake plan. I brought her here so we can help. It was beautiful to see how he started caring for others. As if helping each elder was his way of making up for what he'd done to me. And I understood God was turning his guilt into purpose. That pain that could have destroyed us was now guiding us down a new path. And on that path, divine justice was starting to reveal itself with gentleness. At the end of that month, he told me, Mom, I'm trying to build something real. I don't have all the answers, but I know I don't want to live hiding behind smiles anymore. That sentence made me smile. Because that's exactly how he started lying to me, with smiles. And now it was truth that he was using to rebuild everything. Every visit, every honest word, every small gesture was a brick in a new wall. I didn't know what the future held, but inside me something was growing. This wasn't the end of the story. On a sunny Saturday, Eric came over with an envelope. I was on the porch watering the hydrangeas. He called out, Mom, can I show you something? I sat in the wicker chair, dried my hands on my apron, and nodded. He held out the envelope with both hands like it was something precious. Inside was a check, for the exact amount he had taken from me, with interest. My eyes paused on the numbers, but my mind was flooded with memories, the bank statements, the shock, the pain. He said, I want to give back everything that was yours. But more than that, I want to give back your respect. It was like time stood still. The breeze moved the curtains, and for a moment everything was silent. But it was a good silence. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and I saw a man. Not a boy looking for forgiveness. A man trying to do the right thing. I held the check for a few seconds, then looked at him and tore it into 4 pieces. His eyes widened. Mom, why? And I answered with a soft smile, because the debt was paid with repentance, not with paper. He cried. For the first time since it all happened, he cried without trying to hide it. And the first held him. A long, tight hug full of forgiveness and hope. That moment didn't erase the past, but it rewrote the future. It was like God whispered, now yes, now the new beginning starts. We stayed there in that hug for a long time. The sun, the neighbors, the clock, none of it mattered. Because when forgiveness is real, time has no rush. And in that embrace, we sealed a new pact, less promises, more presence. In the days that followed, he returned to the community center with even more dedication. Helping seniors with their finances, explaining contracts, teaching how to use online banking. The local paper even ran a story about him. Former gambler now teaches retirees how to avoid scams. I read that headline with a lump in my throat. I never imagined seeing my son's name tied to something so beautiful. And that was another sign that God was rewriting the story with bold letters, deep lines, and the ink of repentance. One Sunday, he took me to an event at church. He introduced me as the strongest woman I know. My eyes filled with tears. Not out of pride, but out of honor. Because few things hurt more than being dishonored by someone you raised with so much love. And few healings are as sweet as being lifted up by the one who once brought you down. After the service, a woman came up and said, Mrs. Parker, your son changed my husband's life. I smiled, thanked her, and deep down thought he changed mine too. But even with all that, I knew the process wasn't over. Life moves in cycles, and forgiveness, even when given, still needs to be nurtured. It's not like flipping a switch, it's more like keeping a candle lit in the wind. And though Eric had done so much, something in me knew more was still ahead. One more piece, one more turn, one more sign that all of this, even the deepest pain, was part of a bigger plan. And that plan still wasn't fully revealed. By then, faith wasn't just a hope, it was the foundation of our rebuild. Eric started gathering people with similar stories. Widows who were deceived by relatives, retirees who lost everything trusting their children, women who loaned out cards and watched their money vanish. He listened to every story like he was hearing his own. And when he shared ours, he didn't hide his mistakes. On the contrary, he told them in detail, owned his faults. I'm not an example because I did things right. I'm an example because I chose to change. That's how he began. There was something healing about that honesty. Like shedding guilt made room for purpose. I watched him from the back of the room sometimes, or through the screen of my phone. And every time my heart filled with something hard to explain. It wasn't just pride, it was faith, gratitude, and the quiet relief only a mother feels when she sees her child finding his way back. I knew God was using his story to heal other mothers. And that for me was worth more than any financial restitution. One time during a talk, an elderly woman stood up crying. She shared that her grandson had done the same thing as Eric. She stayed silent out of shame, afraid of breaking her family apart. And that day, for the first time, she chose to forgive. I was there. I saw her and the boy embrace at the end. That hug made me realize something deep. Sometimes our pain isn't just ours, it's a bridge. A way back to someone else's heart. And God uses those bridges to save more than just one family. After that, the community center started to grow. They created support groups, booklets, even a partnership with the city. Eric became a reference in the neighborhood. And quietly I became a reference in his heart. Mom, this all started with you. If you had turned me in, I would have sunk. But you prayed. That sentence hurt and healed all at once. Because it wasn't easy to choose prayer over punishment. But in that moment, I understood God didn't ask me for justice. He asked me for the courage to believe the impossible was still possible. And so even with scars, I felt like I was living a daily miracle. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that transforms souls. A miracle that starts in betrayal and ends in transformation, that grows out of pain and blooms into dignity. I saw it in the eyes of others, in the way people spoke to me with respect, in how Eric listened to me now, like someone hearing a voice made of gold. And that voice wasn't mine. It was faith, hope, that quiet courage only a wounded mother can carry and still stand strong. But the cycle wasn't fully complete. There was still a missing piece. A link between everything we had lived and something that was still coming. And deep down, I knew God wasn't done writing our story. After that hug with Eric, the house felt quieter but not with painful silence. It was a different silence. A kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't call him, and he didn't push for daily contact either. There was a new respect between us. Like we both understood that reconciliation needed time, not speed. I went back to my routine, prayed, read, visited Marlene. And even though I missed Eric, sometimes something in me said that this distance was also part of the healing. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea like always and started writing in my prayer journal. I wrote, Lord, I don't understand the process, but I trust the outcome. That was how I lived now. Not waiting for things to return to how they used to be, but open to whatever new thing God wanted to do. I started noticing small changes in myself. I no longer woke up scared or checked my bank account in fear. Slowly my dignity was returning, and that was worth more than any check. Marlene said, "You look prettier these days, Susan." I laughed and said, "I think it's just my soul settling inside." And honestly, I felt it. My faith was stronger than ever. Not because I avoided pain, but because I faced it head on. When a child disappoints a mother, the wound goes deep. But when that child starts to truly change, it's like seeing a tree grow out of stone. You can't explain it. It's just a miracle. And the peace I lived in now was proof God was still working even when I couldn't see it. Eric sent messages from time to time. "Hey Mom, I made corn cake today and thought of you." "Mom, remember your chicken casserole recipe." Things like that. Small bridges of affection, I replied slowly. "Oh, that's nice, son," a heart emoji, a take care. Because my forgiveness had been instant, but my trust was being rebuilt one step at a time. Like fixing up a house after a storm, brick by brick. No rush, and in that slow rhythm longing turned into presence. Even if he wasn't around every day. Loneliness still visited now and then, but it was a different kind of loneliness. Not full of questions and hurt and whys. It was a loneliness with meaning, with purpose. I knew that behind the temporary absence a transformation was taking place. And when faith is real, it holds even in the waiting. In those moments, I thought of the cross. Of the time Jesus spent in the tomb before rising. 3 days of silence that felt like defeat, but were just preparation for glory. And if God did that with his own son, imagine what he could do with mine. And so life moved on. Slowly but with direction. I cared for my plants, wrote reflections, read scripture, and sipped my coffee without rush. And every little part of my day seemed to whisper, "Wait, Susan, the next page is coming." Because when you plant prayer, you harvest answers. And when the answer comes, it never comes small. It was on a gray Wednesday when the phone rang. I answered without thinking, probably another ad call. But the voice on the other end was calm, firm, and kind. "Good afternoon, is this Mrs. Susan Parker?" My heart clenched. Yes, this is she. The woman continued, "Your son Eric is here at the Hope Center. He volunteered for a financial rehabilitation project focused on low-income families. He said he wanted you to know." For a few seconds I couldn't speak. I just managed to say, "Thank you for letting me know." I hung up slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked in the mirror and saw my eyes filled with tears. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was a mix of surprise and relief. Eric was really walking a new path. And now it seemed like he wasn't doing it for me anymore. He was doing it for himself. That was the most important part. Because when change is real, it happens from the inside out. And in that moment, I knew God was truly working on something bigger than anything I could imagine. Bigger than the both of us. I wondered if I should go there, see it for myself. But I didn't. I chose to wait. I had learned to let time do its work, and it wasn't out of pride but out of faith. When we let go of control, that's when God moves freely. I just prayed, "Lord, may this project be good soil. May my son find purpose and not lose himself again." I got up, washed my face, and made coffee. That's how I handled strong emotions now. With simple actions. Things that kept me grounded. The days that followed brought no new calls, but the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like seeds being planted. I found myself talking more to God than to people. And I realized that made me feel better. One day I wrote in my notebook, "Prayer is the only phone that never drops a call." And that's what I held on to. Every morning was another chance to believe, to wait, to smile. And with each new day, the pain of the past seemed smaller next to the hope of what was still coming. On Saturday, while shopping, I ran into the daughter of an old friend. She said, "Mrs. Susan, your son mentioned you yesterday at the center's event. He said everything started with one of your prayers." My eyes filled with tears right then. The girl didn't notice. She just kept talking about the project, the free classes, the other young people changing. But I was stuck on that sentence. It started with a prayer. And right there between the rice and beans, I understood my quiet faith had made noise in heaven. I went back home with a light heart. It felt like every step now carried something new, gratitude. I didn't know how the story would end. But I was sure now that it wouldn't end in pain. And that certainty was the biggest miracle so far. Because when we choose to trust without seeing, that's when heaven starts showing us what it's been preparing. On Sunday morning while I was buttering toast, the doorbell rang. It was early. I found it odd. I opened the door still holding the dish towel, and there he was. Eric. His face tired, beard, growing eyes red like when he was a child crying in the bathroom. Mom. Just one word, a whisper, a request for permission? I looked at him for a few seconds and stepped aside. He walked in slowly holding a bag and a notebook. He sat at the table like someone coming home after a long exile. I sat across from him and we just stayed there for a while. No words, just presence. Then he began, Mom, I lost control. I'm ashamed I betrayed you. I only wanted to impress you to show I could be someone. But I got lost in it. His voice shook, but his heart was wide open. It was like watching a broken vase trying to piece itself back together. Every word cut, but also showed there was still shape left. He wasn't looking for pity. He was searching for dignity. When he finished speaking, I picked up my cup, took a sip, looked him straight in the eye and said, Son, pride makes us steal what God never meant to take. But repentance, oh repentance gives back what no money ever could. He lowered his head. We sat in silence for a few seconds. But it wasn't the silence of distance, it was reverent silence. Like we both knew something sacred was happening. Real reconciliation feels eternal. He reached into the bag and pulled out a notebook. These are ideas, Mom. Ways to help seniors protect themselves financially. I've learned so much and I want to share it. I want to use what I went through to keep others from going through the same. My heart warmed. It wasn't just talk, it was action, it was purpose. It was pain turned into seed. That was God. Like he took cracked clay and decided to mold a brand new sculpture. I thought of the prodigal son's story. But in that moment I saw something new. The return isn't the happy ending. It's just the start of a new story. And looking at my Eric, I understood we were stepping into a new chapter. He asked to come back, but this time as someone changed. And I, even wounded, knew this return wasn't coincidence. It was planned. It was divine justice laced with grace. And when grace steps in, nothing stays the same. I stood up, went to the shelf, and grabbed his father's Bible. I handed it to Eric and said, This is yours now. Let it be your compass, not your decoration. He held it gently like someone receiving an inheritance. And I knew the faith that once carried me was now being passed to him. And little did we know that this symbolic gift would lead to something deeper than we ever imagined. Eric started going back to the support group at the community center. But he wasn't just another participant anymore, he'd become a kind of informal mentor. He began organizing group talks, monthly meets, practical guidance sessions. When he told me about it, his eyes had a new kind of shine. He said that at one of those meetings, a man repeated the exact words he once used to say, I just wanted to impress my mom. And that hit him. But it also healed. Because he realized that our mistakes don't define us, they can be the key that frees others from the same prison. I want to be the last one in our family to fall. Because of shame, Mom, he told me one night while sitting on the living room rug. That line pierced through me. It felt like a vow, a silent pact with the truth. He started studying personal finance and began putting together simple materials anyone could understand. If you can get it, Mom, anyone can, he joked, trying to lighten the mood. I laughed too. But deep down, that gesture of including me showed how he saw me now. Not as some fragile elderly woman, but as part of the solution. One afternoon, Eric came back from a meeting with a folder full of papers and said, Mom, there's a man who lost his retirement. Because of a relative, and I saw in his eyes the same fear I saw in yours that day that quieted me inside. I knew exactly what that fear was, a mix of heartbreak and helplessness. But now it was my son helping to erase that fear from someone else's face. And I saw in that a justice that didn't come from courts, but from God's hand in the daily choices of someone who had decided to change. He started offering free consultations, going into people's homes, reviewing paperwork, spotting scams. Some even started calling him the senior's financial angel. I thought that was a bit much, but I could see how this was giving him back something no money could buy: purpose. One day he told me he finally understood what it meant to live with dignity. It's not about how much you have in your wallet, Mom. It's about laying your head down at night, knowing the truth is in order. I didn't say a word, just nodded. Because hearing that from someone who once lied to me was living proof that a miracle had. But what touched me most was that he didn't hide the past, he used it. He shared his own story, exposed his own shame, showed the numbers, the statements, the bounced checks. He'd say, if I got out of this, you can too. And that kind of honesty is what moved people. His faith now had hands. It was visible, a faith with action. And from my corner, I just prayed, Lord, protect this transformation. Don't let him forget where he came from, or who prayed for him when no one else believed. I knew his journey was only just beginning. But the most important part had already been reclaimed: his conscience. And a restored conscience is worth more than anything money could ever buy. Still, there was one last scene waiting to unfold. One final moment that would seal everything we had lived through with a kind of justice only God can write. It was a cloudy morning when Eric showed up at my house holding a large envelope. He didn't say much, just hugged me and sat at the table. "Mom, there's something here I made for you." I thought it was more material from the center, but it was something else. A report. He had listed every dollar he had taken from me with dates, categories, and updated interest. And at the end, a signed declaration. "I commit to paying back every cent, not because you asked me to, but because my conscience demands it." My heart tightened, but my eyes overflowed. As I read, he continued, "It's not just about money, Mom. It's about giving the truth back. You forgave me, but I want you to see that your forgiveness bore fruit. I'm not sitting back. I'm moving forward." That moved me deeply, because so many think forgiveness is the end. But it's only the beginning of the road to rebuild. And watching my son walk that road firmly without self-pity made every moment worth it. Even the pain. Even the silence. Even the days I thought I had lost him for good. The following week we went together to a city fair where the community center had a booth. I saw him guiding seniors, answering questions, handing out flyers. A woman walked up and said, "This young man saved my dad from losing his retirement." I looked at Eric and he gave a shy smile. In that smile I saw no arrogance. Just humble relief. He knew he was still paying a debt, but now with purpose. His past pain had become a tool for service. That's redemption in its purest form. That night after the event, we sat on the porch with 2 glasses of juice. He turned to me and said, "You know, Mom, I feel freer now than I ever have. Even without much money, even still cleaning up mistakes. Because real freedom is when your soul owes nothing." That hit me harder than anything else. Because I knew the worst kind of debt isn't financial. It's the kind that keeps you from living in truth. And finally, he was free. Not because someone cleared his name, but because he took responsibility. I started seeing the prayers I whispered alone in my room come to life in his actions. Words I had spoken through tears were being fulfilled before my eyes. With every new step he took, I felt that the seed planted in pain was beginning to bloom in faith. It wasn't fast or perfect, but it was real, and what's real carries eternal value. One night, I wrote in my journal, "Faith doesn't protect you from the valley, but it guarantees you won't walk through it alone." And that faith is what kept us standing. One day at a time. Still, something inside me said the cycle wasn't finished. That one last chapter, one final twist from heaven was still coming. Because when God begins something, he finishes it with excellence. And I could feel in the air that something even greater was on the way, something that would seal this story as an unforgettable testimony. In the months that followed, Eric threw himself into work with the elderly. He started a small consulting business focused entirely on retirees. He called it Rooted Security. I thought the name was beautiful. He said he chose it because he wanted older people to feel grounded, protected, like strong roots holding up the family tree. I went to the opening. He insisted on introducing me as the inspiration behind it all. "This is my mom. The woman who taught me that dignity is worth more than any inheritance." I could barely hold back my tears. The office was simple but full of meaning. Pamphlets with information, a desk for appointments, and a framed quote on the wall. "The truth is the best investment." I watched seniors leave with smiles, holding on to advice they likely never got before. Eric spoke calmly, looked people in the eye, listened more than he talked. It was a direct reflection of the pain he had once caused, but now transformed into empathy. The betrayal that once broke me was now saving others from the same fate. That's what faith does when it finds good soil. He started getting invitations for talks, podcasts, even a story on local TV, and in every space he made sure to tell his story. Not to boast, but to warn. If I could fall, anyone can. But if I got back up, so can you. That phrase became something of a motto, and oddly it never got old. Every time I heard it, I felt another piece of our story being redeemed. I'd see mothers look at me with respect. Like what I had lived through had become a reference, not a shame. He started visiting retirement homes, speaking at churches, meeting with community leaders. He said he wanted to create an easy-to-understand guide for seniors about money. All I wish is that I'd read something like this before Mom. Maybe none of this would have happened. But I'd reply, maybe it had to happen, so you could stop it from happening to someone else. That wasn't resignation. It was purpose. And when pain finds purpose, it becomes strength. A strength no one can steal. Sometimes I'd watch him from a distance, talking to someone, handing out a flyer, smiling. And I think this is why I didn't turn him in. This is why I prayed. Because standing right there was a new man. Not perfect, but restored. And more than that, willing. Willing to serve, to listen, to teach. His faith now was alive. It pulsed through his actions. And I from my quiet place kept praying, Lord, finish what you started. But there was still one more chapter. Something to close this journey with the same weight it began. Something not brought by Eric's hands but by the answer of a God who forgets no prayer. One afternoon Eric came with a plain envelope. It was white with nothing written on it. He handed it to me and said, "This is the last step, Mom." I opened it slowly. Inside was a check for the exact amount he had taken from me months ago, with interest. "This is what I owe you. But what I really want to give back, Mom, is your respect." I held the envelope in my hands for a while, looked at him. He stood firm but with wet eyes. That moment was more than money. It was a repair, a complete healing. I took the check and stayed quiet. My hands were shaking. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Son, you already gave me back what mattered most, your truth." And right then I tore the check. His eyes went wide. "But Mom, this is fair." And I answered, "I don't want justice on paper. I want justice of character. And you're giving me that one day at a time." We hugged, a long hug full of meaning. After that hug with the torn check, we sat in silence for a few minutes. A light silence. This time it didn't weigh on us. It was the kind of silence that only exists between two people who have understood each other without needing many words. I walked over to the cabinet, grabbed 2 glasses, and poured grape juice. We sat at the same table where so many hard conversations had taken place. He said, "Mom, I still have a lot to fix, but now I know where to start." I just smiled and answered, "Start with people. Always start with them." The most beautiful thing was that he spoke with truth, no more excuses, no rush. He understood that respect can't be bought or demanded. It has to be built. And every day, in every gesture, he laid another brick in that foundation. When I looked at him now, I saw the kind of man my husband would have been proud to see. Not because of his clothes or job or company, but because of who he had become. Because of the courage to face his own failures with dignity. And that, for me, was the greatest victory a mother could ever have. He started caring for me in a new way, not like someone trying to fix everything, but like someone who knew how to listen. If I said I preferred to pay my bills in person, he came with me, without taking over. If I asked for help understanding a bank letter, he explained patiently, without making me feel small. There was respect in every action, as if now he understood that dignity isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, and that no real faith survives without it. I saw a continuous miracle in that. A daily miracle. One day he asked me, "Mom, why did you forgive me so quickly?" I paused, then answered slowly, "Because I knew it wasn't you." It was the mistake speaking louder at the time, but I could still see your heart behind it. He cried, and I let him, because a man who cries out of repentance isn't weak. He's strong. Stronger than many who've never fallen. The faith that changed him was the same faith that kept me steady during the darkest days. And now, those 2 faiths were stitching us back together, thread by thread. In the following months, he rebuilt ties with relatives, visited uncles, asked forgiveness from people he had drifted from. Every reconciliation felt like a new chapter. I could see how determined he was not to repeat the pattern, to break the cycle, to do it differently. And that transformation wasn't just about him, it touched everyone around him, because when someone truly changes, that change spreads. And faith stops being just a prayer, it becomes testimony. And a living testimony is the kind of miracle no one can deny. But even with all that, life still had more to show us. And on one ordinary Sunday, while we were watching a talk show on TV, something unexpected happened. A live interview question reignited something in me. Something even forgiveness hadn't fully closed. And that would open the door to a new kind of answer. We were sitting side by side, sunlight slipping through the curtains, when the interview started on the local channel. It was a feature about seniors and financial scams. I was listening, sipping my tea, when the reporter said, "Today we're speaking with a special guest, founder of an initiative that's been changing lives across Tennessee." And when the camera cut to the guest, it was Eric, my son, in a suit, but with the same eyes as always. My heart nearly burst out of my chest. There he was, on screen, telling our story to the world. "I made a mistake with the person who loved me most," he said. "But that mistake taught me everything I needed to help others." The reporter got emotional. I took a deep breath. It was my mother's prayer that saved me. And that's why I do what I do. I couldn't move. The program lasted just over 20 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. When it ended, he turned off the TV in silence. Looked at me. "Mom, do you still feel ashamed of me?" I stood up, took his hands in mine, and said, "Son, you are the answer to my prayer." That night, I got messages from church members, neighbors, even people I didn't know. "Congratulations, Mrs. Parker. You're an inspiration." I never looked for recognition. But in that moment, I understood something deep. When God heals a pain, He makes sure to honor the one who... And that moment felt like heaven applauding. Not for me, but for the story, for the transformation, for the prayer that was planted in tears and bloomed in full lives, and all I could do was thank him in silence. Eric started getting invitations from other cities. He said he wanted to take the project further, that he didn't want to stop. But he promised to always come back, and he did. Every week, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with fresh bread, sometimes just his presence. And every visit was a quiet reminder, I'm still your son. And you're still my foundation. One day he said, Mom, if I ever mess up again, call me to pray. And I answered with a laugh, I'll call before. Because when you pray, you don't wait for disaster, you prevent it with faith. During one of those visits, he handed me a printed invitation. I want you to speak with me at the next event. Tell your side of the story. I froze, said, but son, I'm just a simple woman. And he said, but you're the reason all this was possible. I said yes, not for the stage, but because I knew my pain had become a bridge. My faith had become a classroom, and my courage to hold on had echoed beyond the walls of my home. As I prepared my words for that evening, I realized that our story wasn't just ours. It belonged to thousands of mothers, sons, entire families. It was living proof that faith planted in tears blooms with purpose. The event was held in a full auditorium, people of all ages. Men and women sitting, listening closely. Eric opened with the calm, steady voice he always used. Then he called me to the stage. I walked up slowly, hands sweating, heart racing, took the microphone and took a deep breath. I didn't come here to tell a tragedy. I came to tell a miracle. The miracle of a son who came home, and a mother who chose to believe even when everything said otherwise. The crowd fell silent, that beautiful kind of silence, the kind that feels deeply. I told them how I found out everything, how hard it was to look at him without pain, how I chose to pray instead of accuse, not because I'm a saint, but because I'm a mother. And a praying mother never lets go, even when that hand hurts. I saw eyes filling with tears, people nodding. I talked about betrayal, hope, the courage to wait without guarantees. And at the end I said, when we pray, God doesn't rewrite the past, He rewrites the heart, and that is enough. Applause. But what touched me most were the hugs afterward. A woman came to me crying. I needed to hear that, my son's in prison. But now I know I won't stop praying. Another one said, I thought I was the only fool who got robbed by someone I raised. But now I see I'm not weak, I'm strong. That healed me more than any medicine ever could. Because when your pain becomes healing for others, you understand the purpose behind it all. Faith becomes seed, prayer becomes a path, and shame becomes testimony. In the days that followed, my house filled with letters, flowers, little notes. People telling their stories, thanking me, asking for prayer. I read each one slowly, carefully. I kept names aside, prayed for each one. And every letter felt like another chapter of this story that seemed far from over. You need to write a book, Susan, some said. I laughed. I didn't know if I would. But I knew we were already writing something bigger, a redemption journey that wasn't just ours. It belonged to everyone who ever loved someone who failed. Eric hugged me the next Sunday and said, Mom, I think now I understand why all this happened. I smiled. Took you long enough. And he said, because only someone who's fallen and gotten back up can teach others how not to fall. That sentence said it all. Every tear, every prayer, every stained bank statement. And in that hug, I felt something different. Like God was saying now, yes. The mission is complete. If this story stirred something in you, if any part touched your heart, if someone came to mind, if you saw a little of yourself here, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because this is a space for stories like this. Stories that bleed but heal. Stories that start with pain but end in faith. Here, we don't romanticize suffering. We turn it into seed, into learning, into testimony. There are a lot of Susans out there, people betrayed by those they trusted most. But there are a lot of Erics too, trying to come back but not sure how. Here, we show there's always a way, that God never wastes a wound, and that a mother's prayer, no matter how simple, moves mountains the world can't even see. So if you need inspiration, comfort, or just someone to remind you it's possible, this channel is for you. The faith that held me up still holds me, and now it can hold you too. Every video here is made with truth, with care, with purpose, because we believe in transformation. We believe in different endings. And if you're going through something hard right now, take a breath. This isn't the end. God is still writing, and while He writes, we walk together. So turn on the bell. Share this video with someone who needs it. Leave a comment below. Tell your story. I read everything myself, and I pray over every name, because I believe no story ends in pain. It's just waiting for the right moment to become a miracle. And if you've already experienced transformation, share it with us. Someone out there might be changed by your story, because every restored life is another brick in the kingdom. And here we build together, one day at a time. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, may God bless your life, just like He blessed mine.